My guest today is author, designer, and my new organizational better half, Whitney English. She's just come out with a new book called Organize First, Decorate Second: How to Go from Clutter to Creativity. And the reason I'm calling her my better half is because throughout our conversation, I had the sense that we were like separated at birth and were unknowingly developing along two sides of the same coin. Whitney focusing on living a clutter free life, and me focusing on how to make your passion for stuff mix well together. But that's really too simplistic of a description, especially for Whitney. And we both place a high value on deep beauty. And as you'll hear, Whitney is not naturally an organized person, and she's not really even minimalist in her style. Her pursuit is about editing out the stuff that gives us grief to make room for the stuff we actually want. And she uses the word edit very purposefully, and you're about to hear why. Whitney English, welcome to the Slow Style Home podcast. You're such a wonderful writer. You're just so personable and relatable. Tell us why you choose. Do you want to tell us a story about why you wrote the book, or how you went from being chaos to much more sanity focused?
I think I'll take the first question because
Okay.
I don't feel like I have arrived yet on, on the answer to the latter. So I think I was doing something around the house and I don't remember what I was doing. Maybe I was trying to hang pictures or who knows what, but I just thought to myself, okay, organize first, decorate second. And it's such a basic elementary thing to say to yourself, but very often I think it's easy to want to get to the exciting part of the project. It's if I'm painting a room, the prep work is the most boring
Yes.
part.
Kills me.
If I'm refinishing a piece of furniture, I don't want to sand it. Can we just jump to the transformation? And I think we have this tendency as a culture and a society to want to jump straight to that it's done feeling. And we sacrifice a lot in the process. And so I wanted to write this book to explore the tension between my love of stuff and my need to organize it.
That's what makes you so relatable. You also said in your book, our homes are both mirrors and molders of our inner lives. And I like that. I agree that it is both. So expand on that a little bit.
I think that writing about home is an interesting thing because home was not a great place for everyone across the board. Some people had wonderful homes, and some people have had terrible, just horrific home experiences. But one of the things I wanted people to know in the book is that we all have a sense of agency. We all possess the ability to respond to the deck of cards, the hand of cards that we've been dealt.
Mhm.
I came from a beautiful home that looked perfect on the outside, and I learned because I lived through that, that's not the most important thing. I developed an appreciation for beauty and a love of stuff. I see the wall behind you. You see the wall behind me for
Right.
anybody that will be watching this video. But I really wanted to talk about how, as a mother, I have this opportunity to teach my kids through how we do home together what it looks like
Mm.
to live in a world. How do I raise kids that have learned how to do home well here so that they can go out into the world
Yes.
and make the world a home for other people who might not have had the best experience with home? How can we be
Right.
home for each other?
And you're very personal throughout the book, which is also, that's so lovely of you to be so honest. And you talk about your mom a lot in the book, and
Hmm.
that's a sort of, it is for
Hmm.
all mothers and daughters. I don't even need to say more. What were some things that you learned when you were growing up that you wanted to and did teach your children in a different way?
Ooh, that's a doozy of a question, Sandra.
It could be a lighthearted example if you like.
No, I'm not afraid to talk about the hard stuff. And I think that's important too. Sometimes it's hard to have the awkward and uncomfortable conversations with your kids or with your parents.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but it's important. It's one of the themes of my life this year is the word tension. I think
Right.
we often use the word balance, but this idea that we are always in process, we are always becoming, we are never quite there, we're never fully arrived, nothing's ever perfect. And so, how do we learn to sit with that?
Mm,
How
right.
do I have a home that looks beautiful, but it's not going to be perfect? And if I try to make it perfect, what kind of trauma am I going to be creating? The women I babysat for growing up, the mamas that I babysat for, taught me so much. They taught me that home can look different ways. So
Right.
one mama told me one time, you have to pick your battles. And I just had never heard that before. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, in our house, we pick every battle. And she was basically giving me permission to say, you don't have to fight that if you don't want to. And I've tried to teach my kids that nothing is more precious than they are.
Mm.
And I struggle. I'm not a perfect parent. I call it my dirt threshold. It's really high. My mother does not approve. I can tell you that right now.
Right, right.
I actually have this cute little blue and white tile that's in our drop zone pantry mudroom area, and it says this house is clean enough to be healthy and dirty enough to be happy. And like never has a phrase encapsulated my lifestyle more.
Yeah,
But I still have these moments where I hit my dirt threshold and I just lose it. I'm like,
yeah.
I can't handle this anymore. I also hate cleaning.
Mm.
That doesn't make the situation any easier. But the other day, after I lost my temper with my daughter, I said to her, I realized I felt convicted about it. And I went to her and I said, listen, the reason why I yelled at you about the state of your room is because I'm trying to teach you how to live sustainably in this world. But it wasn't right for me to yell at you. And for me to continue to yell at you about that would not be right. That would be actually very wrong for me to realize that I did not
Mhm.
treat you correctly and then not to change. And something about saying that to her and acknowledging that has kept her room clean since then. Like in a not perfectly, not
Right.
spotlessly, but it was almost like instead she's 12. So instead of giving her that opportunity to dig in her teenager heels and resist and double down on the chaos in her own room, I think she realized that decluttering and organizing and keeping a clean house is something I struggle with too. And that
Yes.
maybe if we struggle with it together,
Mm.
that we can help each other. So that's something that I've tried to do differently.
Mm.
Long answer to short question.
Yeah, no, like you said, it's a loaded, not a loaded question, but there's a lot to that question. And
Mm.
I think that, and you do this throughout the book, I think you recognize the positive things you learned in your family of origin, and you keep what works for you and you let go the stuff that was harmful or just doesn't work or didn't make
Mm.
sense, wasn't helpful to you. And I guess that's all we're all trying to do is figure out which advice to keep and which to let go of. Or not even just advice, but which admonishments or which rules, which to keep, which to let go of. Before we get much further into your philosophy around
Mm.
why being a bit organized and clutter free is freeing, I want you to tell us about new urbanism. I loved this
Oh,
part of the book, and I think it's pretty central to your foundation of your philosophy.
yes, it did become very central. So, new urbanism, for those who don't know, is a philosophy of town design developed by Andreas Dewani of a firm called DPZ. And we got to hear Andreas Dewani speak one day. He cited some statistics, and there's a guy named Jeff Beck who did SPECK. He did all the research on this and has written some books about it. So Jeff Speck, if it says that if we want to get communities to walk more, the walk must be worth it. So three things. He said it has to be interesting, It has to be useful. So we're trying to go towards a destination. We have a focus point in mind, and it has to be safe. And then Andreas Dewani said in this presentation, as he showed us this overlay of Rome to Manhattan, he said, Rome is beautiful. And if something is beautiful, people are going to look at it, they're going to appreciate it, they're going to maintain it, and it's going to be safe. America is so pragmatic and so practical. We came over here and we figured out how to get it done, and we were resourceful and made it happen. And we've thrown the beautiful baby out with the bathwater. The ancient philosophers said that of all the values, that truth, goodness, and beauty were the highest three. And you could describe those as a three-legged stool, one without the other, things collapse. That we live, especially in America, in a world where there's so much preaching about truth and moral goodness, and we're bombarded with that every single day. But beauty inspires in the human soul awe, and anything that makes us catch our breath. So it might be a beautiful painting, it might be a grand cathedral, it might be classic architecture, it might be a story that moves you. But anything that, I get goosebumps just talking about this, because we say the word beauty and we think makeup and surface and everything.
Right.
But even the composition of the way you have the paintings hung on your wall, and the colors and how they coordinate with the pillow on the bed, and it just all ties together. And there's something that beauty brings a sense of coherence. And it also, there's a line in a Dostoevsky novel, The Idiot, where he says beauty will save the world. And in some ways, you could make an argument for beauty being the thing that can catch the human heart off guard and really change us if we let it, if we lean into it, if we learn to appreciate it, which I don't think we do as a culture. And I think that's one of the reasons why I do get interested in design. But so that's what I learned with New Urbanism. I mean, there were other tiny little things, but it was that idea that beauty makes things safer, and safer places are walkable. And we know in design that a room needs a focal point, and a walk needs a focal point. And it just, anyway, that's New Urbanism for me in a nutshell.
There's so much I could say to this. And I do this, the very beginnings of this podcast 10 years ago was really about elevating our impression of beauty and what beauty meant and why it matters. I think that this idea of new urbanism, at least how you portrayed it in the book, it also has to do with community, right? It has to do with how do we build great communities, and that walking is so central to it. And then therefore what makes a walkable place. You took that idea and you applied it to the inside of our homes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think wrestling with the tension between form and function as designers, as people who are interested in design. And my dad was an engineer. I love it when something works well. Good function is truly beautiful.
Yes.
But sometimes I think, and this goes back to just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we, instead of sitting with that tension and wrestling with the balance between form and function as a society, I feel like we just choose function.
Yeah.
And when we try to incorporate form as an element of function, it elevates the everyday and the ordinary to something truly sacred, because that's what home is. And yes, my husband and I knew we were never going to be town developers, but how could we take these principles of new urbanism and apply them to our house? And there's a book that was written in the 70s called A Pattern Language by Christopher Alexander. And he's talking about the terms that designers and architects use. And he's defining ideas and putting terminology around concepts that we wouldn't ordinarily recognize. Like a focal point would be an example of one of them, or the idea of a borrowed view, and all the way down to like, how do the shadows and light play on a different corner of your house or your property. So I try to apply things like that, all the way down to, this is where we come into the organization part of it, is you have to organize all of that first in your head and in the kitchen drawers. And sometimes it requires reorganizing, like just how you have to empty a drawer. I emptied my kitchen drawer the other day and took everything out and put everything back in. I didn't get rid of anything. There wasn't an edit, but just putting everything back in an organized fashion helps you kind of restructure. It helps my kids know where to put things when they're unloading the dishwasher. Everybody has a little bit more clarity about where things go. We're not struggling quite so. It took me 15 minutes to empty
Right.
that drawer.
If even,
And
probably. Yeah.
I think we all run out to the big box store and buy like the latest botanical prints and the matching pillows. And that's not necessarily beauty. Sometimes beauty is being able to open a drawer and find what you're looking for.
One of the things I love about your approach is that you are admittedly a not naturally tidy person, and that you've also tried every single organizing trick and list and how to do, and you still felt badly about yourself because you couldn't make it stick. And so that's another thing that you bring to this book is this idea of, okay, let's turn this on its head. How do I organize it for me? So I'm just going to read this one little thing that you said that stuck out to me. If making your bed daily isn't a task you currently do, don't add it to your morning routine just because someone else suggests it. Instead, choose activities that genuinely make a difference for you. Identify the parts of your day that bring the most joy and satisfaction and build your schedule around them. So can you give us an example of maybe something you were like fighting against and then you were like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to do it this other way?
Almost every productivity person is going to talk about your morning routine at some
Yes.
point in time. And so the idea of not making my bed came from, first of all, I think it came from the inner teenager who's still rebelling against the idea of cleaning her room. But the idea there, when we get up in the morning, we all pretty much go to the water closet and use the restroom. And so the idea became like, okay, what habits can I attach to that action? And just
Yeah.
start there. And if I can just one by one attach different habits. And
Yeah.
so then the question became, which habits are going to happen next after that one action? And so then it became washing my face, which was more important than making.
The bed.
And I actually read recently, I thought, this is the justification I've been looking for years, that like dust mites live in your bed if you make it, but if you leave it exposed, it airs out during the day. And so
Oh,
it's cleaner.
I had no idea. And I'm very anti-dust mite. They freak me out. And that is a great thing to hear that we can just leave the covers back.
Yep. It does look like a mess. There's just no way around that. It really does. It looks nicer when it's
Right, right,
all straight and flattened out, and
right.
but c'est la
But
vie.
you were like, okay, but that's not the most important thing. First, it's going to be washing my face. And then
Right.
eventually that leads you to, I think, make decisions about even where and how to store things based on your
Right.
natural tendency of the path you take or your habit of, I don't know, like how you sort through the mail when you come home. Or
Right.
so therefore, how can you make that activity less of a burden by making
Right.
it streamlined or whatever, which I think is
Right.
really what your book is about.
Thank you. Yes. If you got that, then yes, you got the message.
So I think you talk about making life more simple with the daily things that we just have to do. It gives you the breathing room for things you really do want to do and a beautiful life and having time for all of that. So I think that's a big part of your philosophy. And you break that down more. You talk about, I think these are chapters, seasons, systems, routines, and rituals. And do you want to just walk us through what each one of those means to you and what job they do in terms of getting this very freeing kind of life?
Yes. So I think any first time parent is going to recognize pretty quickly that they're in a new season.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you're in the season of worrying about sharp corners on coffee tables. And so, if you're a designer and you're helping someone in that season educate them, that season is not going to last forever. And sometimes, when you are a parent of babies and toddlers, it feels like it's going to
Oh,
last forever.
you're
So
in the thick of it. Yeah. Yeah.
why on earth would you spend good hard-earned money on a coffee table with sharp corners, because that season's not going to last forever, sweet friends.
Hmm.
So that's the best example of when I say season, I'm not necessarily talking just about the spring, summer, fall, winter. I'm talking about you
Of
have
our life. Yeah, yeah,
in life. Yeah. So I think that if we recognize those that can inform our ability to make better long-term choices.
Mhm.
If we can organize for both the present and the future, and not just organize like the kitchen drawer, but organize our decisions and choices so that we're like, okay, my designer really wants the coffee table with sharp edges. And I grew up in a house with sharp edges and we all survived. I'm
Yeah,
also one of those parents that it's okay to have nice things because we need to teach our children how to steward those things.
right.
That's another season.
Sure.
First, we have to keep them alive, and then we have to teach them how to live in a house where you have nice things and
Yeah,
how to what stewardship means and like
right.
the full life cycle of a thing, and not just, oh, we bought this nice coffee table, but you spent really good money on that coffee table. So if you decide to change it, are you just going to give it away? Or are you going to take it to a consignment store? Or are you going to just
Yeah.
is someone else going to be able to? There's all thinking about things from that's another thing that new urbanism taught me is there's a life cycle to things that we've forgotten about in America. We
Yeah.
just throw them into a landfill and we haven't learned how to maintain them. And, how do we fix the broken lamp instead of just going to Target and buying a new lamp? So, anyway, so seasons and then systems obviously being just core to the idea of organization. Like everything needs a home. And I'll even say to my kids, like, where does this go? And if they
Hmm.
say it doesn't go anywhere, I'm like, okay, we need to pick a home.
Yeah.
Pick a little imaginary garage someplace that this thing can go be parked into. That the idea of wrestling with this thing that I'm not very good at is one of the ways that I improve. It's one of the ways I learn. It's saying I'm not very good at this, but then so rather than be the expert on it, what are the ways that I've learned to add systems to my house? So anyway, that's what I mean by systems. And then the idea behind routines goes back to that first morning routine. If I'm going to go to the restroom, then I'm going to wash my face, then I'm going to have my coffee, then I'm going to brush my teeth. But the idea behind routines, I have recognized with my kids as well. You start to see that children adapt to routines when they're
Hmm.
very young. I am not normally a routine person, but our oldest child has to have a routine. It is, he knows it. He's 15. He knows
Yeah.
it. And we
Yep.
all know it. And then, and it was interesting in writing the book. There's a difference between a routine and a ritual, but it's a very fine line because when you add meaning to a routine, it becomes a ritual. And that is what that bedtime routine has done for us and
Mhm.
for my kids. This idea that we're shutting the house down. We're saying good night to the day, and we're closing loops in our mind and
Yeah.
conversations. We're just putting a bow on the day and saying, we're all here. We're all good. We're all
Yep.
grateful. And we're going to rise rested to tackle tomorrow.
That's a gift to have a day end that way and to be able to count on it ending that way.
I think the concept that I'm trying to get across in the book is this idea of organizing what's about to happen
Mm.
and then saying, okay, let's add the meaning and the depth and the beauty to it.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
what I've tried to do because, like I said earlier, like designing a home just isn't just about the things we put on our walls. It's the way
Right.
people feel when they walk in. And yeah,
100%. I want to talk about the concept of editing as opposed to decluttering. I loved that word, and it's because it has other connotations as well. You liken it to design, to photography. Tell us why you like using edit instead of decluttering.
I tell a story in the book where my mom came to visit me when I lived in Dallas for a brief stint. And I went to work the morning she left. And when I came home, she had left these little tent cards with her very perfect handwriting in all caps. She'd left them all around the apartment and it just said edit on every surface. Because I had little Battersea Limoges boxes and little cute things that I had collected over the years. I was fresh out of college. I didn't have big, nice, large
Yeah.
scale design things. I just had these
Yeah.
small little trinket things I was trying to decorate with them. And fast forward a few years ago, I had hired a designer. We put together a Pinterest board and we're collecting all these ideas and things. And she said at one point in time, in response to what I don't remember, but she said, it's all about the edits. You just have to keep editing. And that gave me permission to delete things that don't work anymore. She was talking about a Pinterest board.
Mm.
This image does not spark something within you anymore. If that image isn't doing that for you anymore, delete it. And so that's the edit. It's this idea of I don't have to carry that just because this served me in a season. It's
Right.
about the full life cycle. This served me in this season. It's no longer serving me. Why am I carrying it around? If I'm going to save an image off the internet, and I have carried a hard drive around the images, these go back to 2002. Like I have pictures of textiles that I saved off of eBay. Like I used to get on eBay and search vintage textiles and just save the pictures because I couldn't afford to order the fabric.
Yeah.
But the more my eye evolves, I think that's another thing that designers have. It's so hard to communicate and explain to other people, but this idea of educating your eye, I think that's why we go to
Mhm.
museums and what's why we
Mhm.
travel is the more you see, the better understanding you have of the meaning behind things and how organizing all these details work together to create not just a beautiful room, but a beautiful environment. And
Yeah, I think it's about watching, looking for how things relate to one another. And if you
mhm,
change the direction of something, a shape, and what does that do for the other shape versus having it lean inwards versus outwards, or it's all about realizing that everything is chosen for a reason and then trying to decipher, okay, what was their reason? Why did they do that? I think in the editing, we don't know what they took out, what they edited
mm,
out, but guaranteed there were things that were edited out because there was
right.
just too much. And I think that you said something about giving yourself permission to let go of things. Yeah, I think that's a big one for people. And that brings me to another thing you talk about in the book, which is that you have to have a reason why a space needs to be organized. It can't just be because it looks bad or because I'm embarrassed because someone's coming over. There needs to be a motivation there
Mm.
and so talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
I think for me, the motivation is quality of life. It's this
Mhm.
idea that it makes things easier to find. It makes
Mhm.
me less frustrated in the moment. It makes the house more orderly. And I think it ties back to this idea of slow style home, which as I dug into your podcast, I was like, these are some words that I feel like I've been looking for. But this idea that we're never going to fully arrive, it's never going to be
Yeah.
perfectly organized, it's never going to be perfectly functional. But we can learn to appreciate the nuance and the detail and the organic side of the human element,
Mm.
and how that adds meaning to our lives. So I think for me, the motivation is in this idea of can something work well and look good at the same time? It's like a puzzle for me. I love figuring that out.
Yes. Yes.
At the same time, my best friend and I always joke that like your house, it doesn't matter whether or not you tell yourself you're having a party or not. Your house will never look better than when you have a party.
But to me, I know there's the whole wanting to keep up with the Joneses or that thing about, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed when people come over. But I think there's a nicer side to it too, or a less fraught side, which is that it's a celebration. You want people to be as relaxed and
Mm-hmm.
happy as they can possibly be so that there's good conversation so then it's memorable, right? It's not even that it's not just about looking good, right? It's about
Mm-hmm.
what kind of an atmosphere do I want to have when I have people over? How do I want them to feel? And
Right.
you talk about going through that not just in every room in our homes, but every little space. What do I need from this space? What do I need it to do for
Mm-hmm.
me? And you talk about don't just run out and buy a bunch of
Right.
organization supplies, which as tempting as that may be, and as beautiful as the color coding looks, The system has to fit your way of life. And yeah, and in the book, you have exercises to help you think through these things. And as you
Hmm.
say, they're not really hard exercises because you've tried
Hmm.
that way. You've gone through the
Hmm.
books like there's 15 questions you need to answer in order to do something. And you're like, that's ridiculous much, right?
No, like I no, yeah, I think we've all read the organize, and there's nothing wrong with those organizing books. Sometimes they're humorous, sometimes they're inspiring, but our brain is a muscle. And if I'm cleaning up my closet and every time, that's one of the reasons why I did like Marie Kondo's question of does it spark joy? It was just
So
one
simple.
question,
Yep.
so
Yep.
simple. Because if I have to be like, when was the last time I used this? And when am I going to use it in the future? And do I have room to store it? Or I'm going to get through three shirts before my ADHD kicks in.
You're done.
And I'm, and there's a pile of clothes on the floor.
Yeah.
But the idea of just, I probably used the question like, has this served its purpose? That's
Mm,
probably the main question.
yeah. It's just occurring to me that you said your word for the year was tension and recognizing that, not that you want to be a tense person, but recognizing
Right.
tension is, it just exists and how are we going to live with it?
Mhm.
How are we going to respond to it? And
Right.
there's a tension in your book between, I want to give you a step-by-step system or step-by-step instructions on how to organize, but at the same time, I want you to know that it evolves, it's more amorphous than that. It depends on you and your lifestyle, and you have to play around with it, you have to tweak it, and you don't organize once and you're done. It's almost
Mhm.
like you're saying we all need our daily lives to be a little bit simpler. So to make room for what we want. And so you're helping us think through really about, I guess it's about how to prioritize, how we need to prioritize.
And I think it's also about the pressure that I have felt from society, and then also from as a byproduct of the way I grew up, to be perfect, to
Yeah.
get there as fast as possible.
Yes.
And to just be like, okay, for anybody else out there who's feeling, if you feel less than, that is why. If you feel like you are not doing enough, it is because counter to that, that not feeling enough, something in our minds, in our environment is telling us that this isn't the way it is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And in the last chapter of the book, I use a quote from C.S. Lewis that I will butcher, but it basically says like this idea that there's a longing in us for something that the world cannot satisfy must mean that we are meant for another world. And I think that longing is that desire for beauty or that desire for perfection. I think rather than racing to see if we can get to that moment first, if we will allow ourselves to explore what that means and how that looks, how that plays out, it might be a more circuitous journey, but it's going to be a deeper journey. It's going to be a more meaningful journey. It's going to be a journey that leaves a legacy. And ultimately, I think that seed, that desire for that ultimate perfection is planted within us because that's how beauty works. Like it is
Mhm.
supposed to inspire us
Mm.
to reach higher and do better. And but the answer is not in a big box store purchase or a new set. Let me redecorate this room. That's why I
Yeah.
love this whole slow style thing is there is something absolutely charming about the fact that we have an antique pine. I found it in a garage at an estate sale, like caddy thing that's got
Yeah.
spices on it in the pantry. And
Yeah, I love the description of your pantry in the book. And it's you've refitted all of these things to fill the purpose that they need, but because they're old, they're interesting too, and they have some
right.
soul to them. And it occurs to me as you're speaking that I talk a lot about figuring out your style, and you and I both agree that you don't have to fit in one box, really comes from this impulse to follow your curiosity.
Mm.
And it's almost like you're saying that even organization, which feels so like there's a right way and a wrong way, and it's these steps to follow, and it feels very kind of regimented. Even organization is it's part of our homes, and so therefore it's following our own curiosity about ourselves. And you say that too. Edit to find who you are. And
I love that.
yeah, I love that. And when you take the time to go through your things and you look and you go, do I actually love this?
Hmm.
Still, maybe I used to, maybe I never did, but I felt guilty. Never. So even this process of decluttering, there's an emotional,
Mm-hmm.
creative, and intellectual element to it that to me is a lot more interesting and fun than just the, okay, let's get my 3 bins out, donate
Mm-hmm.
and refix and all whatever and trudge through it. So it's uplifting. And I just want to say this book it's philosophical. And so I feel people who are listening, we've all read the organization books. We know the
Mm-hmm.
basics. We know most of the hacks and things. This is about figuring out why to
Mm-hmm.
do it in the first place, which is why I was so excited to talk to you and why I recommend this book so
It's
much.
such a compliment and such a gift. I thought when you were just talking, an anecdote came to mind.
Yeah.
I am sure that as a designer, you actually mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. I'm sure you've had a client or a situation where they are trying so hard to work around something. It might
Right.
be a paint color on the wall they don't like. It might be a sofa they spent too much money on. It's it was an expensive decision. Most of the time, that's the justification for it was I
Yep.
spent a lot of money on this, and so we have to work with it.
Yep.
And if you can get a client or even yourself to be like, we're gonna, that's not me. We're editing that out. So if anyone's listening to this and you really feel like if you're working on any type of project and you're like, we've got to work around this, that workaround might be the thing that needs to come out. It might be, you might just have to give sunk cost. And I think that nothing but experience can teach us how to make better choices. As soon as you can give yourself permission to edit out a mistake, it was a bad choice. We can
Right.
let go of it. We can move on. We're
Right.
going to feel better about the end result of this project, whether it's a room or
Yep.
a lifestyle choice, you know?
Yes. Yes. And I think that you actually spend more money because the things you need to do to make the thing
Oh,
work,
yeah.
the thing that doesn't belong work, you're just spending more money and it's never going to actually work. It's really, if you're
Right.
really honest, it's really, and I know you spent money on it, but believe me, you're just going to continue to sink money into a hole that you're not going to like. And I know there's a lot of guilt around getting rid of things that are expensive, but think about how much you've learned about yourself when you go to buy your second sofa. Oh, how high I want the back to be, and do I want the arms rolled or I want them straight? Do I want one
Mm-hmm.
cushion, 2 cushions, 3 cushions? What kind of frame should I be looking for? Because this one fell apart
Mm-hmm.
for years. We have to learn this way and yeah, not beat ourselves up about it.
Give yourself grace to let go of that light blue sofa or whatever bad decision you're hanging on to because no amount of decorating around it is going to make you like that thing that you bought. What you
Right.
really don't like, don't pay me to redesign your room. Just go buy a new sofa. You will be
Yeah.
much happier in the long
Yep.
run if you get a new sofa.
Lots of reasons to get this book. It's fun to read at night before you're going to bed. I mean, that's how I felt. It was like, oh, I don't know. I like to chew on things before I finally close my eyes. So thank you so much for writing it. Thank you for this really
Thank you.
fun conversation. And
Yes, it's been delightful.
we
Thank
didn't
you.
even talk about one single drawer divider, which makes me happy.
Good. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a huge compliment to have that you say that it's slightly philosophical. I think that's the conversation I would like to have more of. And I would like to
Yeah.
teach other people how to, I think that's an interesting way to teach people about design is through philosophy because it's so important. Design is so important and we forget that sometimes. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you're out there sharing your message with the world.
Thank you. Likewise.